minutes.
Thank you, Chair
Actually,
Bertels.
how about 6 minutes?
Whatever. I probably would be done in 5. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ranking Member Frost, for holding this very important hearing. I represent Orange County, California, where we've seen home prices just skyrocket over the last decade. And of course, in the last year, they have soared even more, despite the fact that we have a stagnant economy due to a lot of the policies of this year. But I'll just say off the bat, this is a really, really important issue. When we talk about affordability, for many Americans, housing costs are at the front and center of that, whether it's rent, whether it's mortgage payments. And of course, the statistics have been cited quite a lot. The average age of a first-time homebuyer now has shot up to something like 38 or 41, depending on who you talk to. That means that families are not getting formed. People are still saving for their nest eggs. And as we know, home ownership is the top avenue to building wealth in this country. Now, you talk to economists, and I know Alan Greenspan had a famous moment where he said that, we should have, variable rate mortgages. People shouldn't necessarily buy homes. They should invest in 401ks instead. But all of the empirical data is very clear. While people should do certain things, they don't necessarily do that. Investing and owning a home is the top pathway to building wealth in this country, to paying for things like college and retirement. And so home ownership is really, really important, and it's happening later and later in life. There's a lot of factors. They're a complicated issue. 5 minutes is not enough time to get into this. But certainly this is an income issue as well, as we have pushed more money to the very wealthiest, and we have hollowed out the middle class. That pathway to home ownership has become harder and harder. There's also obviously big permitting issues. Whether it's NEPA or CEQA in my state in California, we know permitting has become a real drag on building homes in this country. We need to address that in a responsible way. I think we need to address environmental issues, but we need to do that in a way that also allows the cheap building of homes in this country in places like Orange County and elsewhere. But I also want to add that the policies of this past year and a half have been so counterproductive to the goals of lowering prices, particularly around home ownership and rentals. President Trump and I both attended the Wharton School of Business. Clearly, only one of us went to class, because the policies that he's enacted over the last year are so counterproductive to lowering costs. Tariffs, for example. Tariffs, and I'll ask you, Ms. Nagy, imposing tariffs, particularly with uncertainty around them, whether they'll go up to 25%, 10%, 15%, what's the impact of that going to be on building costs in this country?
It makes them go higher.
Higher. And in fact, it slows building down to a crawl. And when I talked to some general contractors right after Trump announced his tariffs last year, they all told me the same thing. Maybe you disagree with this, Mr. Hughes, maybe you agree. But what I was told is that because you're building, particularly for bigger developments, you're building out 6 months, a year and a half out. You have a bunch of subcontractors who are relying on cost-plus formulas where they get reimbursed for their costs plus a little bit extra. That no one was buying at that point in time because they didn't know what the tariffs would be. They didn't know what the costs of their projects would be, how much steel would cost, how much concrete and lumber and things like that. Have you seen any kind of impact from these tariffs on the pace of development, Mr. Hughes?
Very little personally, and I was mentioning to the subcommittee earlier, where it affected me was a scaffolding product that's made in Canada. And what the tariffs have done, it forced me to buy something made in the U.S.
Got it. Well, I will just note that as far as Canadian lumber, which is about 85% of all U.S. softwood lumber imports, your website has a 14.5% tariff listed on that. And, of course, that's gone up and down, and that uncertainty has also created problems with building in this country. I also want to talk about the just complete craziness of what Trump is doing with Federal Reserve independence. And every responsible economist knows that Federal Reserve independence is a key pillar of U.S. monetary policy, of financial stability, of our ability to control interest rates, but also to be the reserve currency, which has huge impacts for our economy, for our financial system. And so when you're threatening the Federal Reserve's independence, when you're weaponizing the Department of Justice to go after a Federal Reserve governor based on complete nonsensical claims that they did something wrong when they clearly didn't, as the courts are now finding. Lisa Cook here is obviously what I'm referring to. You end up rattling the markets. And he's doing this all. He's threatened the Federal Reserve's independence so that he can have like a 1% decline in interest rates, a 1% cut in interest rates. I will just note that his reckless and poorly thought out threats to invade Greenland, Ms. Nagy, you're nodding here. What impact did that have on our mortgage rates here in the United States?
Well, the cost of borrowing money, the U.S. bonds went up, or the returns specifically. So actually, we erased all of the progress we had made on lowering interest rates as a result of the $200 billion mortgage-backed securities purchase. So these international trends actually do really impact the bond market and slightly indirectly interest rates.
And I'll just note that a number of different economics groups out there, economists, found that the threats to Greenland actually caused interest rates to go up 140 basis points, 1.4% on mortgages in America. And so, again, this chaos is not good for our markets. I'll just close also by saying one other factor we need to think seriously about in places like California and elsewhere is the impact of climate change. The forest fires that we're seeing on a regular basis every year in California, Southern California, are making insurance a huge cost. It's driving up. It's making housing even more unaffordable. As we start to see sea level rise, coastal erosion, a lot of other impacts to our local environments created by climate change, that is also driving up the cost of home ownership. But I'm over my time. I will yield back to the ranking member here. Thank you all for appearing today.
All right. Thank you. In closing, I want to thank all of our witnesses.